Hey, what's up, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mostly Crime with My, episode 4 to be exact. This is a podcast where you and I get together once a week to discuss all things creepy, sneaky, and downright freaky. This week, we are staying a little closer to home as we deep dive into uncovering some of the details about a gruesome case that took place just next door here in Canada in Medicine Hat, Alberta. It all started on April 23rd of 2006 when a young boy decides to go over to his neighbor's house in hopes of inviting his friend Jacob Richardson out to play. When he arrives, there's no answer at the door, and after waiting some time, he decides to go around back and check if the rest of the family is home. When this friend peeks into the basement of his neighbor Jacob's home, he sees the lifeless bodies of his friend Jacob's parents, Deborah and Mark Richardson, lying there in a pile of their own blood. But how did they get there? Who murdered them, and what else or who else would they find inside of the Richardson family home? Well, let's turn back the clocks and uncover these questions and more. So the Richardson family consisted of Mark Richardson, 42, Deborah Richardson, age 48, Jacob, age 8, and Jasmine, age 12. Mark Richardson was born into a Catholic family and had 4 sisters. He was born and raised in Sudbury, Ontario, and met his wife Deborah, 48, in the late 1990s at a recovery center in Sudbury, Ontario. The two were in a bit of a rough spot initially when they first met because at the time, both Deborah and Mark were drug addicts, but eventually they worked hard together to stay clean, to stay sober, and support one another before deciding to have a family of their own. Deborah herself was known to be a very bright, very outgoing, life-of-the-party type woman with a vibrant personality and was very well liked by others around her. When the pair met, it was said to be immediate chemistry and the two called it love at first sight. The two were married later that same year in Toronto, Ontario, before having their first child, a daughter, the following year. Their daughter's name was Jasmine Richardson. The year that Jasmine was born, Mark, her dad, ended up getting a job offer in Alberta, so in order to support Mark's new endeavors, they all moved out to Alberta to start their new life. After living there for around 7 years' time, the pair had their second child named Jacob. Deborah, their mom, worked as a sponsor for substance abusers and really used her past abuse with substance and her experience in the past to help others regain strength in their own lives. Mark himself worked as a technician, so all around it was a super basic middle-class family. The family were active churchgoers and were said to have gone to church every single week, every Sunday, so it seems from the outside looking in at this point in their lives that they're just a normal North American family. 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, good jobs, church every Sunday. You get the point. If you watch true crime, then you know that sometimes it's the craziest stories that actually come out of the families that seem the normalest. So fast forward to September of 2003, Mark gets a promotion and they all move to Medicine Hat, Alberta. At this point in time, they're moving into a bigger house, Mark is making better money, and the neighborhood that they're moving into is overall a much safer, much more suburban area. So all in all, the family is super happy to be on the up and up in their lives. It's around that same year where Deborah started getting into holistic cleansing and a bunch of that really natural kind of stuff, and she ends up opening up her own little studio inside of her house where she would actually practice and take patients. She was still helping substance abusers at the time, but holistic therapy was sort of her hobby / new interest at the time. The children themselves seemed to be adjusting pretty well, and there weren't really any reports made of the pair ever arguing or not really getting along. In fact, it was said that the 2 siblings really did get along and that the younger brother Jacob really looked up to his older sister, especially since she was so much older than him. He really looked up and admired her. Like her mom, Jasmine was very outgoing, she was easy to talk to, and people just really liked her and she really liked people. The 2 children seemed to have lived a very normal life. They didn't really get into a lot of trouble at school, and even outside of school, they didn't really have any major trouble up until this point. So their parents were pretty lucky in that their kids were just really well behaved and they never really had any big issues. Now, I wouldn't be telling this story if things didn't take a turn for the worse, which is exactly what happened in 2004 when their oldest Jasmine turned 11 years old. It's at this point when things really start to change for her and her family. Now, if you have children, then you might agree with me when I say that around the age of 12 to 15, at least for females, is a really trying time for parents. At least for me, my attitude really started developing at this age, and it's at this time where you really begin to form your own opinion, explore new things and different types of friendships, and women at this age are a little bit more mature than boys, so we're maturing more rapidly than our peers, and it's this time when we kind of make friends that might be a little bit older or, become a little bit more rebellious, and this is a really difficult thing for parents to navigate, especially when your kid goes off to high school and starts meeting all different types of people, which is pretty much exactly what happened with Jasmine. Although for Jasmine, she was only 11 years old at the time. So for Jasmine, this was the year that she really jumped into her gothic phase. She went from a very bright and vibrant young girl that everyone knew and was really familiar with to a very dark, depressive type of state that she really just did a complete 180. She would start wearing makeup, and really heavy black makeup at that, and very stereotypical gothic clothing like all black, tutus, dog collars, the whole 9 yards. It was also at this time that Jasmine set up her first social media accounts and started using them. And of course, she always lied about her ages on all of these websites, and it wasn't too hard to believe given the fact that she wore a ton of makeup and looked a lot older than she actually was. Jasmine had regular accounts like MySpace, for example, but she also had accounts on websites like Vampire Freaks, where she would write things about how she was a nocturnal Wiccan and how her two biggest idols were Jeffrey Dahmer and Marilyn Manson. Her parents really didn't question her much around this time because they figured that it was just a phase Jasmine was going through. To them, they weren't aware of these online accounts, so as far as they could tell, what she was doing was just a normal teenage phase, and she wasn't really hurting anyone, so it was kind of like no harm done type thing. Because her parents were so supportive, they really looked at this as a way that Jasmine was just expressing herself, and they thought it was supportive of them if they just kind of sat back and took a back seat. Now, Jasmine met a lot of people through these online accounts, and most of which at this time were all older females who really liked to go out and party and go to these rock concerts. Now, for Jasmine, it really wasn't hard for her to make these friends because her accounts said she was older, she looked older, and so everyone just kind of assumed she was. Jasmine really didn't have a hard time getting into these shows or any R-rated movies like you think she might because of how she looked. Now, her parents, as I said, weren't really aware of what Jasmine was doing, and they definitely weren't aware that she was going to these rock shows, and she would often meet older men at these shows as well, which makes it even worse. And even though she was lying about her age, the age that she said she was 15, which is still a minor, so I'm not really sure why these men were flirting with her in the first place, but that's something that we don't even need to get into today. Now, Jasmine had to hide her outings from her parents, so like many other kids her age and a little bit older, she would sneak out and meet her friends whenever she wanted to attend these events or any of these parties that were going on. Eventually, of course, her parents find out about what had been going on, and it's at this point that they begin enforcing stricter rules on Jasmine, which, as you know, almost never goes according to plan. Her parents were just really worried about her and also worried that she might end up being in the same situation as they were when they were her age, getting into substances and abusing them, and it really scared them that she might potentially go down that path, so they were just trying to do everything they could in their power to prevent that from happening. Jasmine and her parents started fighting a lot, and she became very hateful toward them, claiming that they treated her like she was a prisoner and that she really just hated her life there at home. She even tried to get put into foster care a few times, but that never ended up happening. And because she went to a Catholic school, Jasmine wasn't allowed to dress the way she wanted to at home with all of her gothic attire because it just wasn't acceptable there. This made her even more enraged, and at this point she just became a very angry individual who pretty much just hated the world and had that everyone hates me perspective that most teenagers do at that age. Despite the rules at her school, though, Jasmine continued to dress how she wanted, and she really didn't mind getting in trouble as a result of her actions. Jasmine would continue to sneak out to these parties and these rock concerts that her friends went to, and it was there where she meets her soon-to-be 23-year-old boyfriend, Jeremy Steinke. Now, unlike Jasmine, Jeremy had a very tumultuous upbringing. He grew up with siblings in a broken family where his mother often made partners with people who were very abusive and would beat him and his step-siblings. He was treated very unfairly in his household, and because of his mother's instability with relationships and just overall life, they moved around a lot, which made it very hard for Jeremy to make friends. And to be honest, Jeremy really wasn't your typical kid anyway, so him being known as a sort of weirdo, it was already hard for him to make friends as is. Now, it's at the age of 22 when Jeremy, just like Jasmine, gets really into this gothic era and starts attending rock concerts, dressing like a goth, joining online vampire websites with like-minded people, and he also told people at this time that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. So, yeah. Now, whenever he would go out to these rock concerts, Jeremy would meet a lot of young girls, just like Jasmine, who had fake IDs or were just barely old enough to be attending. And Jeremy, not caring about their age, just took advantage of them with his ability to, number one, drive them around, and number two, be able to buy them alcohol, which at that age, that's some pretty cool shit. Now, of course, a guy with all of these perks is definitely tempting for a young girl who is super naive and barely old enough to attend a Starbucks espresso bar, let alone a real bar. So he did end up meeting up with a lot of girls, and he tend to gear towards young girls because of this. In 2006, January, Casey, Jasmine's friend, decides to introduce her to Jeremy. She said that she thought they would really get along because they had similar interests, and the two of them met, and Casey was right. They really hit it off right away. After the concert where the pair met, the two continued to stay in touch by exchanging phone numbers and began their relationship together right after that. In February of that same year, Jeremy officially made the 12-year-old Jasmine his girlfriend through an email. And in case you're wondering, yes, Jeremy did know her real age at this time, but he just did not care. Mostly because men like this simply can't get older women because they're just not naive or stupid enough to be convinced of these manipulation tactics that people like Jeremy use. So they go after younger girls who are more naive and are more willing to fall for the BS. Jeremy and Jasmine would frequent concerts together. They talked all the time, and he would even serenade her with his guitar by writing her love songs. So for a 12-year-old girl, he's basically her Romeo. And of course, this was huge for Jasmine, and she really got into him in the time that they spent together, and she just became increasingly obsessed with him over time. Obviously, because she wasn't actually allowed to attend these outings with her parents' consent, she just kept sneaking out. Now, of course, her parents had no idea that she had a boyfriend who was 11 years older than her, but when they found out that she was sneaking around, they grounded her once again and prohibited her from leaving the house unless it was for, school or things like that. So at this time, she's prohibited from going out, but keep in mind, the parents don't know about Jeremy. One evening, they left Jasmine home to babysit her 8-year-old brother, and Jasmine got up and left to go and see her boyfriend, Jeremy. Her younger brother called the parents and was like, hey, I'm scared. I'm literally 8 years old, and I'm here by myself. And so the parents came home, infuriated, obviously, finding out that Jasmine had just left her younger brother at home alone. So, of course, at this time, the parents tighten up the rules even further, and of course, this angers Jasmine even more. Jasmine couldn't leave the house, but she was still allowed to use her social media because, of course, Jasmine convinced her parents that she really needed social media to do her schoolwork and continue with her homework, so they really didn't see a problem with her still having online access, obviously, of course, because of the fact that they didn't even know she was chatting with people there. She would spend all of her time online talking to Jeremy, and I'm sure you guessed it, complaining about her parents and how much they suck and how much her life sucks and just how much they're suffering because of the fact that they can't see each other. Now, to someone like Jeremy, who is super immature and just odd in general, he's really beginning to form hate for Jasmine's parents as well because in his mind, he's thinking, well, yeah, she's right. This is the only reason that we can't see each other. Jeremy and Jasmine's messages at first were sort of like this normal romantic type messages like I love you, I miss you, things like that. But they increasingly became more and more suspicious as time went on when Jeremy would write things like I miss you more than I miss killing people, or Jasmine would write things like, let's kill someone together and things like that. So their messages just became seemingly more and more scary as time went on. Jasmine's parents eventually unlock her computer just to see what she was doing on there, and obviously they're terrified to see what had been going on between the two of them, and they even find provocative photos of Jasmine that she had sent to Jeremy. This obviously worried them, and at this point they're infuriated with Jasmine. And now they're just really concerned for her well-being. So at this point, they really didn't know what to do because she's not listening to anything that they're saying anyway. She's not really following rules, so they kind of feel like they have no control over their daughter. Now, this did actually end up helping them really understand Jasmine and develop a relationship between her and her parents for at least a little bit of time. And it seemed that they were really taking the right steps in order to get Jasmine to finally respect and open up to her parents. A couple weeks into their counseling, they decided that they were going to loosen up their rules just a little bit at home and start to give Jasmine back some freedom. Why they did this after a couple weeks, I couldn't tell you, but they did. Part of their rules were that if Jasmine wanted to go to a concert like the one she had been going to previously, then she had to bring her parents with her. So you guessed it, Jasmine decided to do just that. Jasmine wanted to go out to a concert with her friends, so she told her parents, and her parents decided to come with her. During the first hour or so of the concert that they attended, Jasmine, of course, disappears, probably plotted that out from the beginning of time, but this really starts to worry her parents, so they go around asking her friends where Jasmine is. No one knows where she is. The parents are increasingly freaking out, and eventually they roll up to a dark alley where they see Jasmine and her 23-year-old boyfriend intensely making out. Obviously, her parents snap on Jeremy and tell them that they better not be caught together again, and pretty much tell Jeremy that he's a perverted sicko that needs to stay away from their daughter, which really ticks the both of them off. I mean, for me, I actually cannot imagine this being my child, because if it had been my daughter in this situation, which I don't have kids, but if I did have a daughter and this happened to her, I cannot imagine remaining as calm as these two did. So kudos to them. They were beyond reasonable in this situation. Now, as I said, this really enraged Jasmine and Jeremy because the pair really believed that they were in love with one another, and Jeremy started to see her parents really the only thing that was standing in their way. And again, it's so scary as a parent because this 11-year-old girl is being groomed and brainwashed by this older man who's completely sick in the head, and she pretty much feels like she owes all of her loyalty to him at this point. Her parents eventually take away her phones and her computer, so what Jasmine did was she went to her school library during her classes, skipped her classes, and spent the entire day on the computers there online chatting with Jeremy.
Don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.
It was at this time where she begins to plot against her parents. She starts off by sending Jeremy an email that reads as follows. So I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you. So are we set? I'm going to try and call you, but I don't really know if I'll be able to. They're threatening me like shit. I hate them so much, but I hope this won't bring us far apart. I hope to talk to you soon. I love you with all of my heart. Jasmine. After getting this email, Jeremy replies as follows. Well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative with the details and stuff. I wish they wouldn't treat you that way. Grr, it angers me to hear that I dislike them so very much. Don't worry, I love you too, my sexy beast. I hope to hear from you soon, too. Take care, my love. You have the key to my heart, and soon enough you shall have my heart if I die. 'Cause if I give it to you now and I die, you won't be able to hear how much I love you. So with that being said, the two begin plotting how they would kill Jasmine's parents in hopes that the family is gone and they can be together peacefully. Jeremy, being not so clever himself, actually posts things online about this and totally goes public with his plan to kill them. He begins by posting to MySpace with the following message. My girlfriend's family are totally unfair. They say that they really care. They don't know what's going on. They just assume as their greed continues to consume. She's slowly going insane. She continues to think that I came into her life to help her out and to stop what they keep trying to shout. It's all total bullshit. Throats I want to slit. They will regret the shit they have done, especially when I see to it that they are gone. They shall pay for their insolence, finally. There will be silence, their blood shall be payment. This is why accounts need to be monitored. I'm all for privacy, but there's a line, and when someone starts writing stuff like this online, I mean, real shady plans to murder somebody needs to step in and intervene. Jeremy even told his friends about their plan, and so did Jasmine. No one, and I mean no one, did a thing about it. They literally just thought that they were making this stuff up and that it was all just them hating on Jasmine's parents. Although I don't know any friends of mine who took it to MySpace to write out a thoughtful plan to kill their parents just because they were mad at them. Although Jeremy and Jasmine were on a vampire-loving site, so it doesn't at all come as a surprise when I hear about them doing this. As of April of 2006, Jeremy is hanging out with his friends when he decides to tell them his plans to kill Jasmine's parents, and once again, they don't take it seriously and just assume he's joking. They kind of brush it off, and Jeremy continues to ask around for help, where other people also continue to brush him off, and they all assume that this is just some nonsense that Jeremy is going on about. Jeremy wasn't just doing it because he didn't like their parents, though. Jeremy was genuinely concerned that if he didn't help Jasmine do this and kill her parents, then she would break up with him, and that was his biggest fear because at the time he was completely obsessed and in love with her, and he would do pretty much anything and everything to make her happy and to make sure that they were staying together. Jasmine, of course, used this to her advantage and really guilt-tripped Jeremy into helping kill her parents. And on April 22nd of that same year in 2006, the pair decides to really put forth their plan to get rid of her parents. So when it comes to Jasmine and her family, on this day, they're all having a barbecue and spending time together. Jeremy, knowing what was about to go down, did a bunch of drugs, got super drunk, and then he decided that he would go over to Jasmine's place. He even made one last desperate attempt to ask his friend if he would help him kill her parents, to which he said no and continued to ignore Jeremy's insane request, just assuming that he was super drunk and out of it. Jeremy went back to his house. He invited a friend over after doing all of those drugs, and the pair of them watched Natural Born Killers, which is literally a movie about a girl and a guy who get together and kill the girl's parents because they can't be together. Fitting, I know. In the movie, the girl also had a brother who wasn't killed, and Jeremy actually, after watching this movie, turned to his friends and said, "See, that's the difference. We are going to kill her younger brother." Of course, the friends continued to dismiss this, which, if this is like the second or third time he's saying this, if I'm his friend, I'm at least inquiring about what the hell is going on. So, of course, the friends dismiss the statement. They continue to go on with the night as if nothing is wrong, most likely because he was high and drunk, and Jeremy just continues to do more drugs. So he specifically snorts some cocaine, does some liquor, and makes his way over to Jasmine's house around 3 a.m. Jeremy enters the residence by throwing a pine cone at Jasmine's window to signal that he was there and having Jasmine come down to the basement to let him in through the window. Now, as I mentioned, Jeremy was super drunk and high, so although he tried to enter the house quietly, he actually made a lot of sound when he opened the window and fell into their basement. It's at this time that Deborah, Jasmine's mom, hears the noise and decides to go downstairs to see what's going on. And she actually thought that it was Jasmine sneaking out, so she quickly went down there in hopes of catching her before she got out of the house. But sadly, instead of her daughter, Deborah comes face to face with Jeremy dressed in all black with a full black ski mask and a knife in hand. Deborah, of course, sees the knife in Jeremy's hand and she begins screaming. She runs toward the stairs to go and get her husband Mark, but Jeremy unfortunately attacks her before she can even reach the stairs. Jeremy begins stabbing her, and at this point, Jasmine's dad, Deborah's husband Mark, hears the commotion happening in the basement and quickly makes his way down there from the upstairs of their bedroom. Mark makes it all the way to the kitchen to grab a knife where he met Jeremy. So the pair run into each other, and Mark is not a small guy. He's a really big, burly guy, so Jeremy later on actually admitted that he was really scared of Mark and that he did not expect him to be that much bigger than him, so it really caught him off guard. Jeremy later said that Mark attacked him so fast that it scared him and that Mark had jumped on him right away and attempted to stab Jeremy. Mark shoved his thumbs in Jeremy's eyes in hopes of getting him to stop, but unfortunately Jeremy regained his strength and attacked Mark. Jeremy stabbed Mark and dragged his body down into the basement where his wife's dead body lay in cold blood. All while this is happening, Jasmine's little brother Jacob is upstairs listening to the commotion. So Jasmine is in awe of Jeremy at this point. She's telling him how much she loves him, how grateful she is that he did all of this for her. And then they realize that Jacob is upstairs alone in his bedroom. Jasmine goes upstairs to her little brother's room where he's curled up in the corner of his room with a lightsaber, thinking that whatever this is, he can simply fight them off, which is just so sad. Jasmine goes up to her little brother and pretends to comfort him, and then she puts him in a chokehold and attempts to suffocate him. Jacob was able to break free from her and was running down the stairs when he ran into Jeremy. There is a quote that says that when he ran into Jeremy, he said, "I'm scared and I'm too young to die," which is so hard to even talk about. Now, what happens after this has been debated a dozen times between the two parties. Jasmine claimed that Jeremy proceeded to kill Jacob at that point on the stairs, but Jeremy claims that it was her. But regardless, one of them or both of them killed the 8-year-old brother Jacob, and Jasmine eventually grabbed some of her things and proceeded to take off with Jeremy. While packing her things, though, Jeremy waited outside for Jasmine, and as he was sitting there, things were really starting to compile in his head, and he was really thinking about how he might have just made the biggest mistake of his life, how, what's going to happen if I get caught. All these things are really running through his mind, and so he panics, and Jeremy just takes off, leaving Jasmine in the house. So Jasmine decides to call a cab and show up at Jeremy's house. When she gets there, she cleans up all the evidence. She scrubs off all the evidence from their clothes, she buries the weapons, and all the while she's calming Jeremy down at the same time. That night, the pair decide to go on to a party, a house party that was happening. So they get to this party and all of their friends are, and they use this opportunity to brag to all of their friends and others at the party that they had just murdered Jasmine's entire family. One person at the party actually claims that Jeremy said he gutted her parents like a fish and that Jasmine said her little brother gurgled when he died, which is so sick and twisted and just completely sad. But as you can tell right away, the pair felt no remorse about what they had done. Later that morning, on April 23rd, the neighbor I had mentioned earlier on in the story decides to go and ask Jacob if he wants to play. So he goes over, he knocks on their door, and he gets no answer. Now he's pretty comfortable with his family, so he goes around back and peeks in the basement window and hopes that he can see somebody who's awake. But when he looks through the basement window, what he ends up finding is the two lifeless bodies of his best friend's parents, lying in their own blood. The child screams, and of course he goes and gets his mom and tells her what he's just seen. The mother comes, she looks in the basement and confirms what he just saw, and right away they call 911. Now the police arrive at the home and begin to do their investigation. Now, of course at this time, they know that the pair had another child named Jasmine, an 11-year-old, but they certainly didn't think that she was a suspect at this time. Police really just thought that this was a travesty that they'd have to unload on Jasmine and that she simply just either wasn't at home at the time of the invasion, was kidnapped, was sex trafficked, or was being held for ransom. Police even issued out an Amber Alert in hopes of finding Jasmine when they thought that she was kidnapped. However, once the police investigate further, it comes to their attention that there are bloodstains on the light switches and inside of the knife drawer in their kitchen. So to them, this is a total red flag that whoever was inside of the house knew the layout and knew where to go to find weapons. The police start the search for Jasmine by calling her school. And it's in the conversation with the school where they find out that Jasmine was a total troublemaker who didn't get along with her parents. Now, they talk to her friends as well, who finally tell police at this time that Jasmine had talked many times about murdering her parents and that they thought it might have been her that did it. Jasmine's school counselor talks to police as well, and she tells them how she tried to get into foster care several times but never did, and that the counselor actually found a photo in Jasmine's locker of her family being burnt to death in a burning house. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many 11-year-olds who draw pictures like that without any real meaning behind it. Police eventually realize that Jasmine is a potential suspect and quickly turn the investigation around. At this point, Jasmine is literally the youngest person in Canadian history to be charged with murder, so keep that in mind. Now, police did their best to really put her out there on the news and spread her photo pretty much everywhere they could, forcing Jeremy and Jasmine to start panicking about whether or not they were going to get caught. Now, this wasn't something that was really hard to do because Medicine Hat, Alberta isn't the largest place in comparison to some other cities. It's got a population of 63,000, so it's not like it's this huge place where news is not going to spread rapidly. Not to mention, Canada is a relatively safe place. Alberta has its moments, but Canada is a really safe place, so this kind of news really spreads and spreads fast when it does happen, especially when it's a 12-year-old who's suspected of the murder. Jeremy and Jasmine decide to flee in hopes of escaping the police, and it just so happened to work out at this very moment because her friend Casey, who had set them up, planned to go on a road trip and had invited the two to come with her and two of her other friends. Now, at this time, Jasmine's friends were not aware of what had happened, and so they took off with them and proceeded to plan their road trip accordingly. Back home, Jeremy's friends did tell police about what had happened and that Jeremy had told everyone about his plan to kill Jasmine's parents. His friends were also aware that Jeremy was going on a road trip because he stupidly told everyone everything. So at this point, police are now alert and ready to make authorities all around the city aware that this couple and their friends are on the run. They post police up at every gas station in hopes that they will eventually stop for gas and catch them on their way out, and this is exactly what happens. The car pulls up to a gas station where they get treats and they fill up their gas, and it's at this time that an undercover cop is sitting there stationed. Jasmine's friends go inside, and at this point, like I said, they have no idea what's going on. So they walk in and they see all these newspaper flyers and all these postings of Jasmine and Jeremy on wanted signs, and they are so confused and so shocked that they grab one of the posters and bring it outside with them. They approach Jasmine about it and Jeremy, and Jasmine just laughs it off and says, "That photo doesn't even look like me." At this point, Jeremy and Jasmine do come clean to the three girls on the road trip and tell them what had happened. Since they were such close friends and now they were aware of everything that had happened, they were willing to protect Jeremy and Jasmine and try to figure out a plan on how to keep them on the run and away from police. The five of them peel off and enter a parking lot of a nearby high school that they had planned to go in order to make their plans. At this time, a bunch of cop cars alongside the one from the gas station who followed them pulls up on the five kids, surrounds them in the parking lot, and arrests all five of them. 3 days later, the three girls that were arrested were released, and Jeremy and Jasmine were kept in custody. Being as though Jasmine was only 12, she did fall under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. And if you don't know, the Youth Criminal Justice Act is a Canadian statute which came into effect on April 1st of 2003. It covers the prosecution of youths for criminal offenses. This act was replaced by Young Offenders Act, which itself was a replacement for the Juvenile Delinquents Act. Basically, what this means is that if you're 12 or younger, then the justice system is going light on you, and the chances of you serving any reasonable amount of time are slim to none. Police tried everything they could initially to get Jasmine to talk, but she would just cry and say how sorry she was that everything happened, and really didn't spend any time admitting to anything or going through a sequence of events. Eventually, police decide to try a new tactic on Jasmine, where they bring in a very young officer and get him to approach her as if he were her friend. This police officer was in his early 20s at the time, and the approach totally worked, and as soon as he came in, Jasmine started to spill the beans. So Jasmine explains what had happened from her perspective and told the police that she went into her younger brother's bedroom not intending on killing him, but that Jeremy had pressured her into doing it, and that she eventually stabbed Jacob in the chest with a knife. Which again, I don't believe for a second, because if we look back on the story earlier, Jeremy had already told his friends that they had been planning on killing Jacob all along, so I definitely think she was lying at this point. In any case, Jasmine just really continued to play the innocent card and claim that Jeremy was really the one who did it all and was the mastermind behind the entire thing. Police suggested to Jasmine that she write a final letter to her parents in hopes of getting some closure. The police's intent with this letter was not really to get Jasmine to write to her parents, but it was essentially to get her to admit what she has done by basically making like a written confession. So Jasmine writes this letter, and inside of this letter, she claims that she feels everything that's happened is a result of her own fault, that she's sorry, that she prays for her family, she's sorry about Jeremy, and that they should really find it in their hearts and souls to forgive Jeremy because he was drunk and high at the time and he was under the influence. She also said that they should forgive him because he did it out of love for Jasmine. Inside this letter, it really didn't give any remorseful vibes. It was very much giving psychopath child. Now, police really had a hard time identifying who did what because it seemed that the pair's stories were just contradicting one another, and they really just threw blame at each other in an attempt to throw investigators off, so it was very hard for them to determine who was at fault with each of the murders. Eventually, they told Jasmine that she could contact Jeremy and vice versa. They did this as a very smart tactic where the two would get to write each other in the form of letters, and their hope was that they would expose some information through writing these letters and contacting each other. And this is exactly what enforcement got. In Jeremy's letter to Jasmine, he said, "Dear Cuddle Bunny, I am sure that you are right. What is done is done. You need not ask for my forgiveness. Indeed, in due time, our empire shall be complete. Before you, I was half. Now I am whole. I can't go back to being half. You are the one that I breathe. You are the moon that breaks through the clouds at night. You are all I need. I long to feel your soft skin. I yearn for your kisses, for they get me high. I hope that you stay true to your words. I shall remain strong. Sometimes I have trouble sleeping at night, but I'm sure the thought of you before will get me through the nights. In due time, we shall be together once again, but until that day arrives, stay strong, keep hope, and have faith. I love you with all of my heart and soul. Never forget that, my love. Until we speak again, XOXOXO, Jeremy." The pair continues to write back and forth, and Jeremy eventually even proposed to Jasmine, so technically they were fiancés because she did say yes, and the writing went on for quite some time. Jasmine went to trial at the age of 13, and her lawyers tried to say that she was just under the influence of a predator and that she was far too young and naive to face any real consequences. They really tried to blame Jeremy for everything and painted the picture of an innocent little Jasmine the whole time. However, no one was really buying that, and Jasmine was eventually sentenced to 10 years. This was the max she could get at her age, so she ended up receiving 6 years in prison and the remaining 4 years on probation. However, thanks to good old Canadian laws and their oh-so-gracious lenient rules, Jasmine never had to spend any time in prison. She was actually sent to a rehabilitative custody, which, if you don't know, it's a sentencing option that provides court-approved treatment and rehabilitation plans for youth who are found guilty of a serious violent offense and are diagnosed with a mental illness or a disorder, which Jasmine was at the time. Jasmine was officially released in 2011 when she was 19 years of age, and when she turned 23, she was free of probation, she changed her name, and no one really knows where she is or what she's doing. Jeremy himself was sentenced in December of 2008 to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Jeremy is still in prison for his crimes and will probably never see the day of light. In fact, his big mouth secured him these years in prison when he confessed to an undercover cop inside of the prison that he had killed Jasmine's family and that he had no remorse about the matter whatsoever. One of the most disgusting parts about this is that after the sentencing, Jeremy grew a huge fan base. During his trial, there were a ton of young teens who would circle around the courtrooms in their gothic apparel, protesting for him, that he should be released because he did it out of love, and just like a super weird fan base developed. Dozens of young girls wrote to Jeremy, they obsessed over him, and this case just became super public, so there was a bunch of girls going after Jeremy. Jeremy, of course, wrote to Jasmine many times, and upon her release, he asked that she come and visit him. Jasmine never did eventually visit Jeremy, which is sort of the icing on top of the cake, being as though his whole purpose of doing this was for the love of somebody who just dipped on him after she was released and was like, okay, see ya. So there you have it, folks. Jasmine is a free bird somewhere doing something, and Jeremy is locked up for life. And although Jasmine is technically free, she will never be free from the mental anguish she will face from all of the guilt that she will succumb to in the next 50 or whatever, however many years of her life. So although she is not inside of a cell, as many of us I'm sure wish she was, in a way, she is forever a prisoner of her own mind, and I can't imagine how guilty she must feel on a day-to-day basis, especially having no family to share that guilt with. So at least there's somewhat of a happy ending in that sense. But I just want to say thank you so much once again to all of you for tuning in to this week's episode. I can't believe we have over 50 subscribers and over 1,000 views already. It might not seem like a big number to you guys, but to me it is. We've only been up for a month, and I just feel so grateful for each and every one of my listeners. So thank you so very much for all of your love and support and for showing interest in my channel. It means a great deal to me. I am super excited to keep providing you with better and better content as time goes on. Hopefully my quality will improve, my storytelling will improve, etc., etc. And on that note, next week I will be releasing a paranormal episode in honor of Halloween, so I can't wait to see how you like it. I'm not sure if you guys noticed my little pumpkin LED lights on my plant there, but I love Halloween and I'm super excited to release it. So thank you all so much. I love you all, and I will see you next Sunday for a brand new episode of Mostly Crime with My.